Bienvenidos a todos. Soy Alison Pierce, la directora de programas para Nature Forward. Estoy muy feliz de estar aquí con ustedes y con dos colegas talentosas que van a compartir con nosotros algunas de sus experiencias de alcance comunitario. Welcome, I'm Alison Pierce, the Deputy Director for Programs with Nature Forward, and I'm really happy to be here today with all of you and with two of my very talented colleagues who are going to share with you some of their experiences doing community outreach. This is just one half of sort of a double panel that we're having about Nature Forward's community outreach. So I hope that you'll join us on the same stage tomorrow to hear from two other of our Nature Forward colleagues. But right now, I would like to turn it to Alice Sturm and ask her to introduce herself, please, and tell us about her programs at Nature Forward.
Hola a todos. My name is Alice Sturm. I'm the Garden Program Manager at Nature Forward. Broadly, the goal of our garden program is to get native plants into the ground, plants that are indigenous to our region. We do this by working with homeowners, institutions, landscapers, municipalities. And today, specifically talking about outreach, especially to Latino communities, we're going to be focusing on a grant-funded program we have that targets water quality improvements in Sligo Creek, and another program that we're going to be launching this month. We're very excited, which really builds on that and involves partnering with multifamily housing and institutions to plant in Justice 40 communities. So yeah, over to Renee.
Hi there, I'm Renee Grebe, pronoun she, hers, and I'm the NOVA Conservation Advocate for Nature Forward. And I've been hosting events with our Water Protectors of Little Hunting Creek programming for the past few years. And we are working in partnership with United Community, which is a nonprofit with a vision of ending multi-generation poverty. And their service area focuses on several neighborhoods in the Route 1 corridor in Virginia, in the Alexandria part of Fairfax County. And that area has been identified as having the second highest socioeconomic need in Fairfax County. And United Community has helped us connect with local community leaders who know the issues best there. And in Little Hunting Creek watershed, through those partnerships, we've been able to offer environmental education, outreach, and engagement opportunities for families embedded in those communities themselves. So most recently this past fall, we led training for adults in these communities on becoming environmental advocates.
Thank you both. Renee, staying with you, could you tell us about a learning experience or a story about when you were first rolling out this program?
Yeah, sure. So in that area of Route 1 where we're doing the programming, it's slated for significant redevelopment in the coming years, and some of it has already started. So our ultimate goal is to reach parents and adults and to let them know about the changes, get them involved in speaking up and advocating for a better, healthier community. And so we often do this by reaching kids and families together. So of learning experiences, one of the communities, Creekside, United Community has a community center embedded right there in the community. And because of this, the kids use that center. They're really independent. They come and go. And so when we had events in the community, kids would come without their parents because that's the interaction they were used to. But because of that, connecting with parents was harder. So even though that was a key part of our goal, we had to recognize the communities, how it worked, and evolve our programming to overcome that, to reach more parents. And then on another side, in Audubon, which is another community there, it's mostly Latino community. It has a really strong network. And one of our key community partners had organized a moms group, which meant that adult engagement was far higher. And so the learning here was look for those strong networks and seek to work with them on common initiatives. What about you, Alice?
So in the garden programs, we offer a number of trainings specifically for landscape professionals on green infrastructure and on native plants. So we knew it was important to offer trainings in Spanish because the Latino community is so well represented among landscape professionals. But the first training we did was actually bilingual, English and Spanish. So one of our first lessons learned was that we really need to do it in monolingual Spanish. It was difficult to get through all the material in 2 languages. It took up a lot of time. And it also meant that some spots in the training were reserved by people who weren't in our target audience because they weren't Spanish speakers. We've also moved from translating our materials word for word, every English word into Spanish, to keeping some terms in English, which can seem counterintuitive. But for one thing, some terms vary widely across the Spanish speaking world. Trying to get a room full of Spanish speakers to agree, things like even mulch or bark. But it's also just more useful to learn those terms in English if you're not familiar with them, or many folks are already more familiar with those terms in English. So we're really just talking about industry-specific landscaping terms, just to reflect the fact that this is a job training class, not a science class.
So Alice, staying with that experience, was there something that surprised you in that program, or that went particularly well, but maybe in a direction you weren't expecting?
Yeah, so I'm always impressed with how much excitement people have to learn more about how landscapes that they're working in were designed and why. Landscapers who may have been maintaining rain gardens or bioswales, for example, for years, um, they don't seem jaded when you're, trying to break those down. They're so thrilled to learn more about how those structures were engineered. And also to in turn share their observations of which work and which don't work so well. And also we've found that offering a stipend helped more folks participate, especially self-employed landscapers, which is a large portion of that group.
Great. How about you, Renee? Did you have anything to share about something that was particularly surprising or unexpected in your work?
Yeah, we recently led this adult training program this fall doing environmental education and advocacy, and it was a series of 6 classes in 4 weeks, and we pulled it together really quickly. We had a target of about 15 participants, but given that it was organized so quickly, and that can sometimes be challenging to get long-term commitments for repeat events that fast, we weren't sure how successful it was going to be in the long term. But remember that community leader that I had mentioned who had organized the moms group? She was our core partner and our core lead in developing the programming and the messaging. And so we worked with Defensores de la Cuenca. She's a member of the community and works with Defensores. And she was integral in getting the word out. We maxed out our registration before it even went out to the public. And that was a total surprise. And everyone stuck with us the whole time. And that's primarily a reflection of what a strong community partner we had. We were working directly with a resident who knew what issues would resonate and who might be most available and interested. And we were able to tailor the program that way. And then part of the success is being connected with that community in some way for many years and being familiar. We had gotten to know this partner over several years, and the community members knew of Nature Forward, even if we were not as well known as she was. And then as a side mention, we also offer stipends like Alice did for her program, because we feel it's an important component to plan for, to compensate people for their time.
Yes, a lot of times people don't have the ability to take some time out of their work lives, or maybe pay for childcare to facilitate being able to just be there. So I'm seeing a note in the chat that you might want to shout out that special partner live, because there's a good chance that she might be here in the conference.
Carla Clore is amazing. Thank you, Carla with Defensores.
So hopefully Carla's listening and appreciates that partnership as much as you do. I know she probably does. Great. Well, Renee, all of that, it seems like really sound and great advice for working with any community or any neighborhood. I'm wondering if you can talk a bit about how engaging with Latino communities might be particular or different from other communities that you've worked with.
Well, I'll cycle back to what Alice had mentioned about it being important to offer trainings in Spanish. This, no surprise, same here. In working with Latine communities for the Water Protectors programming, and because I do not embody the ultimate superpower of speaking two languages, I'm not able to say, for example, that my printed materials are done until they've been translated into Spanish. So I can't be finalizing my flyers or slides at the last moment. So I've had to be particularly conscious of trying to get them done as soon as possible so that we allow the time to get those translated. And then that, this doesn't stop there. Obviously, it's not just a flyer issue. It means pivoting how we plan more broadly for the events overall in terms of timing and resources. Is my event leader fluent in Spanish? If not, have I lined up an interpreter? Have I financially budgeted in advance for additional language support? Do I have enough Spanish language volunteers that can help me who are bilingual? So that's one component. And then the second difference is the communication platforms. There's a strong WhatsApp group for the communities where we work, a bunch of different ones, and that's more effective to get the word out than a paper flyer at times. And many of the residents only communicate via texting versus email. Our model traditionally has been to collect email addresses and do action alerts. But if you want to keep these new contacts engaged long term, we need to have a platform that can support texting and track language preference to make sure we're communicating on a platform they prefer and also a language that's most comfortable.
Great. I'm going to follow up with a question from the chat before moving on to Alice. So Lucila is commenting that having that right community member can be such an important piece. And she's curious about how and when we compensate our community partners. And I know that's something that our conservation department does as a regular practice. So I wonder if you could speak to that.
I actually have that as one of my next things I was going to talk about too. But for connecting with community partners, it depends on if that partner works for another organization. So it might be, in this case, Carla was working for Defensores there. But we have also in the past with other community partners who are residents, we build in stipends for them as well and make sure they're compensated for their time. Absolutely.
And I would just add on to that, because I happen to know it, that when we do have projects that are in partnership with other organizations, typically we're sharing funding with them as well. Great. So Alice, how about for you? Is there something that stands out to you as different in particular in how you go about engaging with Spanish-speaking communities?
So I would definitely echo what Renee said about planning the events and also the importance of, texting as one of those communication tools. Once you have everybody in the room at the event, you are launched. Some differences I noticed that many Spanish speakers working in the green industries have a lot more experience with and knowledge of plants and horticulture than some other folks who might be new to those industries. So I guess you could say, sometimes there's already a lot more knowledge about ecosystem services, even if there hasn't been formal training on that topic. Often Spanish speakers do not have knowledge of mid-Atlantic native plants or the specific engineering. So we end up spending a lot more time on the specificities of our ecosystem here versus talking about more general best practices. And it might be the same curriculum, but we end up speeding over the parts about the interconnectivity of plants, animals, bugs, and people. We end up speeding over how watersheds work and how upstream impacts downstream. That's something that those audiences seem to be clicking to really fast. And we delve into a lot more detail about just, our indigenous plants, and issues, with stormwater management, et cetera, that are really specific to, the Mid-Atlantic, the DMV.
Great. Alice, could you tell us a bit about some of the challenges or obstacles that you're struggling with? And I'll add a piece in there because I know that this is part of it. From the chat, Kirsten is commenting that it can be tough to find the right time to catch most folks. And I know that that's part of it for your program. So can you speak to that a bit?
Yeah. So with the programs that are targeting professional landscapers, there's a lot of independent contractors and small business owners in the Spanish-speaking community. So, and these folks are busy year-round. It can be challenging scheduling, especially learning about plants, because it's easiest to learn about plants when they're not dormant. But that's also such a busy time to be weeding, planting, doing that maintenance, which is getting you paid money. So, folks will sign up, they're interested in the training, but then they may not attend last minute because they might get a better offer or a job concurrent with that training, which is understandable. I think our last training had 20 signups, 16 folks attended. But then that seems pretty good, but actually only 12 of the folks who RSVP'd attended. 4 people who had heard about it, but I guess we had missed the RSVP also came. So, I think continuing to experiment with what time of year we do this to try to find the sweet spot between optimizing hands-on planting and plant observation with when people might have time. Of course, the middle of winter is a busy time for shoveling snow. So it really is hard to find a not busy time of year.
For sure. And then that choice between weekdays and weekends, because people are busy with their families on weekends. And some people are busy with work on weekends too.
Exactly. Yeah, we've done both.
Yeah. There's no ideal answer, but we keep experimenting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. How about for you, Renee? What are some challenges or obstacles that you see over and over as you're trying to do this kind of work?
The scheduling question that came up is real. We know for our outreach events, we pretty much have to stick to Saturday mornings. So that's a pretty restricted time. There's sometimes we can do it in the summer, when it's later. But I think RSVPs have been a challenge over time. It's hard to get predictable numbers to events. And so to the question of, what do we do with community partners in terms of compensation? We compensate not only people that we partner with, if we're making stipends to their organizations, but if we're working with community members themselves who are helping us, advertising, marketing our events, getting out there and talking to people, we compensate them for their time as well doing that. So I think that's really important because they know who to connect with the most. We don't know that. We also just try to be as present as possible, go to as many tabling events, making sure we have Spanish materials and support so that kids and parents can get to know us and vice versa, and then be present again and again and just show up and be there. And it's rewarding for us too. I had a kid that I had first met at an event when he was about 5 years old. And I just saw him this past summer at another tabling event. And he said, "I remember you." And I said, "I remember you." But he was 7. That's a big change from 2 years ago. So that was just fantastic. So all of that showing up can be a challenge. It's time intensive, but it's also really rewarding. And that, being able to show up and compensate your partners, it can result in more predictable RSVPs because you're becoming a more trusted partner, and the partners that you're working with are obviously trusted as well. So the exciting part is that some of those challenges of building that community trust and partnership, it gets easier and experiences become more rewarding. And one example of that is Nature Forward was just recently awarded a U.S. Forest Service tree planting grant. And we had 2 communities ready to join us right away because we were already strong partners.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we have maybe a couple minutes more than we expected because we're maybe speaking a little faster than our Spanish interpreters would like. So I want to throw out another question, a related question. I see in the chat some conversation about sort of communication platforms and the need to invest in technology that allows you to use texting. And this is a question that was not prearranged. So, but I know my colleagues and I know you can think on the fly about this. But I wonder if you could speak to sort of that communication challenge and sort of how you've been able to work through partners and figure out what channels you needed to be using to reach people.
For me, partnering with United Community has been key. They work with lived experience consultants and other resident partners. And so we say, is there anyone that wants to work with us? And they say, here are some great residents who want to work. And we say, you're the experts on everything else. Nature Forward is an expert in a small component of things, and you're an expert in a lot of other things community based. So help us. That's how we find our communication channels.
Great. And Alice, I'll throw this one to you from the chat before we maybe turn to talking a little bit about our Forest Service grant project. Lucia, is wondering if there are any tools or knowledge that we're providing to landscapers to navigate their own customer relations. She notes that she has an issue that comes up. Ooh, the chat just jumped across that. They're often put in a tough situation when the customer themselves don't know about green infrastructure or best gardening practices, and they may not feel confident in sort of leading the conversation about that.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of what we're trying to empower folks to do is get those slightly maybe higher paying jobs with customers who do have a rain garden, are excited about a rain garden, are looking for something beyond, just a lawn. And so, enable people to actually be connected with customers who are already interested in that. And so, we partner with Chesapeake Bay Landscape Professionals Network for some of our trainings, and they have a database that's searchable of landscape professionals who have gone to their trainings. So we always talk about the fact that participating in our trainings puts you in that database so that customers who are already, interested in buying what you are selling, so to speak, can find you. I agree. I think it's a lot to ask, a small independent business person to be, making the case for rain gardens when somebody really just wants their leaves raked, whether or not that benefits the Luna moths. But so I think we've really focused the other way on how to help consumers who are interested in green infrastructure find you and share with them that you have that knowledge.
Great. And we've been able to do that because we have a project where Alice is also doing outreach to homeowners, providing them with native plant kits and design palettes. So we're hoping that will grow over time, our ability to sort of connect the market of consumers and contractors. So yes, as Renee mentioned, we happily were the recipients of one of the Forest Service's Urban and Community Forestry grants. So we're going to be working across the region to plant trees and to plant trees along with pollinator habitat in the understory. And as Renee said, it's, we are taking advantage of all of these existing partnerships that the Conservation Department at Nature Forward has been cultivating for many years now. So Alice, who will be the lead for that work, can you talk a bit about how these lessons that we've learned in our community outreach programs will be brought forward into what we're calling our Treecosystems project?
Yes, there's more to the forest than the trees, as they say, although trees are certainly a key piece. So, as we've discussed, Renee teed us up really nicely by, really investing in some of our first communities. So because of those strong connections, we're going to begin this project by building on those connections in Virginia. We'll be planting 1,000 trees over 5 years, exclusively in Justice 40 communities. So those are communities which have been defined by the federal government as having received not their fair share of infrastructure spending, especially, when it comes to green infrastructure. So, for us, it's a slight change because we'll be working more with community members as opposed to landscaping professionals. But we're going to be working with a lot of multifamily developments, and we will be offering community members a stipend to care for trees and garden plantings near where they live. Some of the first questions we always get from Spanish-speaking audiences, whether they're professional or otherwise, are about whether it's possible to grow species people know and love from their ecosystem of origin, from banana to loroco. And while it's often not possible because this is just the cold north, you guys, it's sad. I think it's really an awesome opportunity to help people forge that connection to an appreciation of our, local ecosystem here. I think it'll be a cool opportunity to not only plant a lot of native plants, trees, and understory, but to also share a lot more about native plants, and invite people to become, I guess, part of our local ecology here.
Great. Well, we have various comments in the chat about how can we get involved, how can we connect to various different communities. So what I would say is please reach out to us. All of our email addresses are our first name dot our last name at natureforward.org. So you can reach any of the three of us if you have ideas for where we should be doing community outreach next. We'd love to hear from you. And we hope that you'll join the panel tomorrow to hear about more amazing Nature Forward community outreach programs. We want to thank our sponsors for not just sponsoring this conference, but many of them sponsoring the work that we're talking about, particularly the U.S. Forest Service. And the next panel is going to begin at 1:45, and it's Getting to Work, Advantages and Disadvantages of DEIJ Work Across Entities. And that'll be the last panel for the day. So I hope you can make it. And thank you so much for being with us.